Hello, my name is Thomas. Welcome to British Culture. Albion never dies. Over the summer, I did some pretty deep dives into different topics, especially covering the British Empire, which is something that had been very, very popularly requested. So I did two episodes on Gibraltar with my friend Kane, who you can find on YouTube at youtube.com/videos by Kane, and you can see his really interesting cultural insights on other cultures, especially China. And he kind of reverse engineered that to explain British culture on the podcast, really talking about the Rock of Gibraltar. I also talked to English Chris, a British Bond addict on Instagram, who gave his insights on British motorsport, something that was quite unknown to me, so I benefited enormously from him. And I talked to Californian Chris, that one Bond guy, about aviation and piloting in James Bond. I really appreciated these fellas' contribution to the podcast, very much appreciated, and these are all, I think, deeply insightful, or at least they were for me, so I hope they were interesting for you. From time to time I like to do just a light, bright break of an episode. I hesitate to call it a filler. Dave Filoni doesn't like his Star Wars episodes being referred to as filler episodes when he has something. He says it explores character and it reveals who people really are. They're not just filler. They're good stuff. I hope that Star Wars reference isn't totally lost on all listeners. I'm a big Star Wars fan, of course. But as I say, I don't like to think this is necessarily a filler episode, but this is one where I just want to take a break and look at just day-to-day life in the UK, slice of life, looking at some different local newspapers, and of course my own personal news. So as I say, light and bright, I'm being evicted, so had to move into this flat I think 9 months ago roughly. Unfortunately it was unfurnished. I was coming from abroad, so I didn't have any furniture, so I slowly having to work to furnish this flat, finding the best deals on furniture I can. Recently I got some really good deals, including a really nice big wooden desk. And then I got my eviction notice. So it wasn't a total surprise, I must say. I knew the flat was going on sale. I'd been warned more in advance than I legally had to. They were good about that. People came round again. They didn't have to give me a huge amount of notice. They gave me way more than they needed to. They came round, perfectly pleasant. There was an offer made on the flat. Again, I was told more than in advance than they needed to. And that gave me the opportunity to start looking for flats around. I saw one, it looked great, but there is a housing shortage in the UK, so I put in my application to rent, so did 5-6 other people, and, if 5-6 people put in an application, only one person can be accepted, and sadly, it was not me. But there are other flats, not a huge number, because I live in a very, very, very small town, and there just aren't that many places to live in. So I put in an application for another place, and that one has been accepted by the landlord, so it's now, as of recording, it's going through checks. I've passed one round of checks, and now going through the second phase. There's only 2 stages. So I am touching wood, having just got this nice wooden desk, I'm touching wood, and hoping it all goes through, because then it will all just be a lot smoother. Anyway, that's what's going on in my life. I hope it doesn't disrupt the creative output too much, but just so you know, that's what's going on, that's what's affecting my own life. And as I say, it's affecting my life a lot more than perhaps huge political issues around the world, and that's why I get fascinated by local newspapers, because they report things that are of huge importance to the people concerned. As I say, national politics and international politics, well, it's interesting. I wonder if you can hear that train going past. I suspect you can. It's interesting, but it doesn't always connect directly to us. I always think a good explanation is like, if a bypass, a new road is being built right past your house, it's outrageous, and you'll have very strong opinions about it, for sure. Even if there is a greater good, you'll have strong opinions about it. If it's been built in the next village, well, you'll know some of the ins and outs. Overall, they're probably going to be a straightforward answer, but you know the ins and outs, and it is, it's a bit complicated, even if there is an answer. If it's being built, several districts away, that's obviously just really simple, and people should just accept it. That's why, I say I don't cover big international topics, even when I do touch on politics, because it's very easy to look far, 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 far away and see very straightforward good guys and bad guys, and yet when it's in your local council, it always seems so much more complicated. So as I say, I enjoy perusing the local newspapers, so I hope you enjoy joining me as I look first at the Gibraltar Chronicle. As I say, I talked to Kane about Gibraltar, or rather, he gave me the benefit of his insights, but he also sent me this physical newspaper that he bought for a whole £1, one Gibraltar pound, which is worth £1 British. And we did have questions in the podcast episode about the currency, but anyway, the Gibraltar Chronicle, the first newspaper that recorded the victory at Trafalgar, Nelson's fleet over Napoleon's. And funnily enough, it is the Royal Navy dominating the front page. Rare sight. The Royal Navy vessels HMS Forth and HMS Scott are pictured in dry dock in Gibraltar yesterday, alongside a Transmarinier ferry. Although Royal Navy ships have increasingly used Gibraltar for repairs and maintenance in recent months, the sight of two Navy vessels in dry dock at the same time is unusual. And that was back in March. So this isn't breaking news. I just think it's interesting news. And perfect for a podcast. There's a really good picture. Anyway, that's where our Mediterranean fleet docks. As is well known, it is a military base. And of course we saw the British military presence there in the great James Bond film, The Living Daylights. A really good film, not my favourite even Timothy Dalton film, that's License to Kill. I just did a YouTube episode on that. And thank you for those who messaged me about it. I appreciated it. I think Kane and I also talked about the beauty competition, the Mrs. Gibraltar. I think I originally misspoke and called it the Miss Gibraltar. Rereading it, it is the Mrs. Gibraltar. The recruitment process has ended for the Mrs. Gibraltar 2023 pageant, with 10 contestants signing up. The competition was open to women with children over 22 years of age or married, in a relationship, separated, divorced ladies between 25 and 49 years of age who do not have children. And I think what I was saying is that for British overseas territory was really interesting, the mixture of names, which I described as English and Spanish, because that's how it sounds to me. Cristal Gonzalez, for example, Nadine Guerrero. But in fact, I was told that these are actually to do like a little subgroup there, the Gibraltans themselves. But I just thought it was really cool. So Francesca Gilling said, she's 29 years old, by the way. She said, I decided to join Mrs. Gibraltar because I would like to put myself out of my comfort zone, and I think this platform is the perfect opportunity to do so. I'm also interested in the adventure this will bring. Georgina Victoria White, 37 years old, mother of a 1.5-year-old baby boy, loves belly dancing, musical theatre and listening to Lady Gaga, said, I've always enjoyed modelling and always regretted not entering Miss Gibraltar. So, when I was finally eligible for Mrs. Gibraltar, I thought, why not? She's not the oldest contestant. We have, of course, Natalie Wink, 39 years old, who enjoys travelling, reading and watching documentaries. I'm going to be 40 this year, and after meeting an inspirational group of older ladies, I thought, why not do what I love again? She's not the oldest. I believe the oldest from this selection is Nadine Guerrero, 42 years old, mother of 4 children. Her passions are both modelling and dancing. I decided to enter Mrs. Gibraltar this year because I love the experience and feeling of being on stage, and also the opportunity of meeting new people along the journey. I have to say, I didn't know that beauty competitions were much of a thing in the UK. I don't think I've ever come across them. I think the first time I came across them was when I saw a headline in a newspaper about Miss Manchester punching, I think, Miss Birmingham in the face in a nightclub in London. And that was how I discovered that we have beauty competitions in the UK and in kind of Britain generally. So they're a bit of an outlier, a bit of an oddity, but I quite like this Mrs. Gibraltar. To be honest, it just sounds like a lot of fun. Kane and I also did not avoid the political issues around Gibraltar. Neither of us particularly specialists on it, but it is reported in the local newspaper. Labour MPs briefed on Gib treaty talks. I have to say, if someone said Gib to me, I might not know what British territory it was. Well, I'd probably guess Gibraltar if they said this is a British territory. But of course they shorten their own name among themselves, that's fine. A top-level delegation from Gibraltar, led by Chief Minister Fabian Picardo, met with senior Labour MPs in London this week to brief them on negotiations for a treaty on the rocks post-Brexit relations with the EU. Mr Picardo was accompanied by Deputy Chief Minister Dr Joseph Garcia, who was there for separate ongoing treaty negotiations, and the Minister for Digital and Financial Services, Albert Solder, who was there for separate meetings with HM Treasury. The meeting focused on an exchange of views with Labour Party MPs. I always enjoy that phrase. An exchange of views generally means they disagreed. a free and frank exchange of views. They raise their voice a little bit. A very free and frank exchange of views. Probably they use language that you could not use on broadcast before 9 o'clock. And my favourite, the freest and frankest exchange of views I have ever heard in my life. A phrase used by a BBC political journalist when two Irish politicians met at number 10 Downing Street, where the Prime Minister then, I think Tony Blair, mediated between the two of them, which suggested very colourful language indeed between the two Irishmen. Anyway, high politics indeed, but what I think really touches my heart is Gibraltarian crocheter helps break Guinness World Record. Congratulations! Ooh, a local woman who's an avid crocheter has returned from the United Kingdom, where she joined the hundreds of other fibre artists to break the world crocheting record. BBC Radio Derby appealed for volunteers to try and break the Guinness World Record for the most people crocheting simultaneously. Some 960 men, women and children of all ages from all over the world arrived in Derby on the day to join the challenge. To break the record, 605 people or more needed to crochet simultaneously for 15 minutes. BBC Radio Derby launched an appeal for blankets for the local community earlier this year. The idea to attempt to break a world record came as a way of giving thanks to those who contributed to the appeal, which saw more than 1,800 blankets donated. The local Gibraltarian describes it as brilliant. The atmosphere was great. Her name is Mrs. Colton, and she's now teaching her daughter to crochet and has taught many, many friends across Gibraltar. Over the past few years, the likes of crochet tops and bikini tops at very low cost have risen in popularity on fast fashion websites like Shein. Yeah, Shein, that comes from nowhere. I get spam on Instagram about it. But anyone who crochets know the time, effort and skill that goes into making well-produced garments and the cost of good quality materials. People don't appreciate the hard work that goes into bespoke crocheted items. Those are made by machines, and there are millions of them. But she had an encouraging word for youngsters hoping to get into the craft, adding, "Don't give up, even if it looks daunting at first, because at the end it is amazing. It also helps declutter my brain, and time just passes so quickly." I like that. A good news story. Right, that was the Gibraltar Chronicle, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I thought I'd move on to something on the mainland from the Whitby Gazette, a relatively recent newspaper. It's only been going since 1854. A bit more expensive, £1.60. I picked this up, I took a day off and went to Whitby, which kind of famous among two types of people really. One would be those who just like very, very twee little villages, and you can see those tourists pottering about on day trips very easily. The others, those would be the people who read about Whitby in Bram Stoker's Dracula. It's where Dracula first comes ashore, and where some of the early adventure is set. And you can see the Goths, and you pretty well know who's there because they're a Goth, and who's there because they like twee little villagers. For those who haven't seen my Instagram, Fleming Never Dies, I'm, of course, a Goth. Right. Crowds out to welcome new RNLI boats, so that's the lifeboats. The King's Flying Visit to NYMR, and a church fund appeal starts. So let's first go to the Royal Lifeboats. Yeah, the lifeboat at home. Whitby Harbour was lined with well-wishers on Sunday, June the 11th, again it's an old newspaper, to welcome the town's new lifeboat, the Shannon-class Louis Ivan. Whitby's new all-weather vessel entered the harbour entrance at 13:49 on the dot, to signify the operational numbers on the side of the boat. Oh yeah, RNLI 1349. These numbers had special significance as they carry the names of 10,000 loved ones as part of the launch and memory campaign. Whitby RNLI coxswain Howard Field said, "It was a very emotional day. To be part of the town and the RNLI's heritage is a real privilege, and knowing how much the lifeboat means to those who have donated to put the names on her makes all the more poignant. Thank you to everyone who came out to show us support today and made it such a special occasion. Training begins tomorrow morning." Indeed, there are a number of RNLI lifeboats all up and down, where you get especially loads of volunteers who are insanely well trained, go out in the worst conditions possible to rescue men at sea. And in fact, I trained with them when I was in the University Royal Naval Units. I used to go out regularly with the RNLI, us on our naval boat, and them on their lifeboat, and we did a huge number of exercises together. I think a memorable occasion for me was, I think it was along this coast, close by to Whitby. I was put into a little two-man survival raft with one other person, and there was a rope between our ship and theirs, and so I did the hand-over-hand thing. I was pulling our little survival raft over to theirs. Good practice for us, good practice for them, to help us aboard and show us around and so on. And then I got a flying taxi. I got a RAF, I think, Sea King helicopter coming along, dropping down a rope. I zoomed up, got given a bit of a fly over the town to wave hello to all the people who'd gone off to the coast to watch all the exercises take place, and then I got happily dropped back onto the naval ship. Thoroughly exciting for me, but very serious work for them, as of course this is something that, especially throughout the winter and through desperate summer storms, this is something that they will do to save lives. Anyway, we'll go straight to that story. Very happy memories for me. Then, if I flick through, the King's flying visit. Yes. So he went to the North Yorkshire Moor Railway, NYMR, to mark the 100th anniversary of the Flying Scotsman and also the 50th anniversary of the North Yorkshire Moors Railway. The King was in good spirits as he exchanged a few words with the children of Gillamore Primary School who lined the platform to mark his arrival. The monarch was then introduced to staff and volunteers who had helped the North Yorkshire Moors Railway and Flying Scotsman reach its significant milestone. At the ticket hall, the chief executive of North Yorkshire Moors Railway, Mr. Chris Price, said a few words before King Charles unveiled a plaque commemorating the 50th anniversary. Mr. Price said it's lovely that he's come here to mark the occasion. We have a great team who've put an awful lot of effort over the last 50 years to make our railway one of the jewels in Yorkshire's crown. No doubt, and I think this is the railway that was in the recent Indiana Jones, The Dial of Destiny, and of course I talked to Matt Wacker about the Britishness of Indiana Jones, and indeed I had been to a historic Yorkshire railway just before speaking to him, but the wrong one. I went to the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway, which has also been in hundreds of films, but I'm afraid it's the North Yorkshire Moors one that's in Indiana Jones, and I believe it's also in Harry Potter. It's Hogsmeade. One of their stations is Hogsmeade in Harry Potter. Yeah, fantastic talking to Matt Wacker. Right, I think there was one more thing, and that was the church. Yeah, that was the church appeal. Excuse me as I rustle the papers. Again, these are physical papers. A sip of tea as well. Church Fund appeal starts. A restoration appeal has been launched to upgrade the historic Whitby Town Centre Church, which was built by Captain James Cook's boat builders, to get it up and running as a tourist attraction. James Cook, who of course did so much to reveal the land that is Australia. It is hoped to make St Ninian's Church a place that people can visit and see the workmanship involved, enjoying a community gathering or just spend some time in peace and contemplation. Volunteer Margaret Hurst is trying to raise funds to get the Baxter Gate building back open and running as a community asset, but she admits it will need some TLC and repurposing after being closed for the past couple of years. Margaret, who has a love of church buildings and local history, said, "It's a challenge, and I want to get it right for the people I've spoken to. For some of the older people who came here, it was their life. Some of the women who came as young mothers built friendships. It would be nice for them to come back in here and back to more of what they remember. It is hoped that the church will be open again to the public within the next few weeks." That would be wonderful. Interestingly, its interior still contains many of the original woodworking examples of men who knew how to build ships, but not necessarily buildings. The pillars that support the balcony were made by mast makers, and the cupboards in the vestry are designed so as not to fall open in rough seas. That's a brilliant feature. Absolutely brilliant feature for a church. I quite like the idea of it having cupboards in rough seas, which I have indeed been out in many, many times. And here, in the Whitby Gazette, we have the classic Views from the pews by the rector of Whitby, turning to God for calm in times of turbulence. In glorious sunshine on Sunday, it was with great joy to be present with many others as Whitby's new lifeboat came into the harbour accompanied by a flotilla of smaller craft, an occasion to give thanks for the commitment and bravery of our lifeboat crew and all who support the RNLI with their volunteering in many ways. Anyone who sails the seas is likely to have an ambiguous relationship with the waters, which are the means of people's livelihood and pleasure, and yet which at times can be so dangerous. In the Bible, the sea is often seen as a metaphor for chaos and destruction, perhaps not surprisingly in a world where boats were much more rudimentary than they are now, and in which the story of Noah and the flood that covered the land was so much part of their culture. Fishing was also very much part of local life, and some of the best-known disciples of Jesus were themselves fishermen. The power of Jesus in stilling a storm and saving his friends fearful that their boat might sink was seen as evidence of his divine nature. People often talk about the storms of life, describing personal issues, the terrible violence of war and terrorism, or crises in our national political life. We look for calm and peace, deliverance from anxiety and danger. Many people find that in turning to God at these times they can find peace and calm, as once the disciples did on the Sea of Galilee. "Calm me, Lord, as you calmed the sea. Let all the tumult in me cease," is a heartfelt prayer that we can all find helpful at times, and which we can trust that God will answer, bringing new hope and the assurance of his presence with us in all we face in life. That is from Michael Gobbett, rector of Whitby. I think a nice one. Views from pews. Good headline. Okay, last newspaper. I got the Craven Herald Pioneer, the voice of the Dales since 1853. So again, a relatively recent newspaper compared to the Gibraltar one. I quite like this. It is the Dales, so another Yorkshire newspaper, not on the coast, but up on the hills. And I enjoy these village fêtes. So I think last summer I was sharing as many pictures as I could from going to little events here in Yorkshire, little village fairs and fêtes, especially at the Queen's Jubilee, where I was just at a very, very, very small village. And everybody in the village, I think genuinely everyone in that village turned out to come to the fête. I think it would be a pretty sad person who just stayed at home looking out at literally everybody else. I think these are wonderful events, and as I say, they can be all-consuming. Oh, you can listen to the longest-running soap opera in the world, which is, of course, The Archers on Radio 4. Whenever they have their cycle where all the summer fairs come in, you get all the characters being drawn in, and I think that's one of the more realistic aspects of the drama. Anyway, a real one. Plenty of fun for all at Gala in Ingleton. And this is a recent one. I just bought this the other day. Yep, Thursday, July 27th. The Ingleton spirit shone through at this year's gala, which was enjoyed by everyone, despite the less than perfect weather. Held on the sports field behind the Ingleborough Community Centre, the emphasis for the day was on family fun, which residents and visitors could enjoy and get involved with. Entertainment was provided with a village parade, a sports day, and a traditional competitions, stalls, food and drinks, and more. Gala committee girls Liz Holman, Sarah Proctor, Helen Wilson, Kelly Robinson and Beryl Moffat pulled out all the stops to make sure the show went with a swing. The colourful parade, led by the Giggleswick and Settle Brass Band, made its way round the village to the sports field where the Gala Queen, Catherine Robinson, was crowned by the retiring Queen, Lily Rucastle. Not sure of that name. Oh, but I see a picture of the Ingleton Queen and she looks all of maybe 10? Maybe? So it's obviously a kid's thing. The crowds were entertained by Professor Pumpernickel, who performed his crazy science show in the community centre hall. The community ladies provided excellent tea and cakes, and the Ingleton Cricket Club and Badminton Club laid on the barbecue. Fantastic. There were many side games around the field for people to try their luck, including the Ingleton in Bloom Guess the Name and the very popular Bottle Tombola to keep fit the ladies. By the Keep Fit Ladies, sorry. The Scouts had a fabulous jousting game that involved the competitors sitting in a wheelbarrow trying not to get a bucket of water tipped over them. Most ended up quite wet, including some of the Gala girls and the Queen. The Gala Queen, anyway. Wacky races were held for the children's amusement, and the ever-popular egg-throwing competition took place later in the day and was eventually won by Ashley Unsworth and Liam Urray, who managed to throw an impressive 27 metres. Oh, that is impressive. Throwing an egg 27 metres, that's no small feat. The Gala Committee worked tirelessly all day, but would like to thank all those who helped make the day happen. Fantastic. So that's from the Craven Herald and Pioneer. Just a fun day out. And indeed, there's a full page of events coming up towards the end of the summer, and obviously people are trying to get all the events finally done. You also have articles on a job with the National Health Service, which, if you want to know more about that, check out the episode N is for NHS, which I realise is perhaps one of my longest episodes that I've ever done, or apart from the deep dive ones. And a governor of a girls' school who's retired after 33 years. So, plenty going on in the Craven Herald and Pioneer. Oh, but wait. There was one more story. I don't know if I bookmarked it, so do excuse me as I flick through. But it's a story that I think... Oh no, there's a couple. Ah, okay, so maybe 5 more minutes. One was just a really cool £1 school scheme. £1 school scheme, yep. Each of the 143 pupils at Kildwick C.of.E. Primary School, Church of England Primary School, was given a £1 coin and issued with a challenge. The children were tasked with using their £1 to generate as much money as they could for the school. The initiative proved a massive success. Over the 6 weeks of the Grow a Pound scheme, a whopping £2,278 was raised. The money will help pay for new books and information communications technology equipment and improvements to the playground. Head teacher Tim Whitehead said he was delighted with the pupils' efforts and the amount raised. He added, in addition to raising much-needed funds for the school, this initiative has also given children insight into how businesses work. In case you're wondering at details in the article later on, yes, a great deal of this ranged from sponsored walks to making clay models to order, and a lot involved, baking and eating. There's details of a new bus, details of a new Rotary president, and this is a great headline. Truly great headline. John celebrates 100th birthday. Ranthmel, I don't know this village. Ranthmel resident who moved to the village as a 14-year-old, also still the outsider, has celebrated his 100th birthday with a party. John Harrison was born on July the 19th, 1923, at home in Keyston and educated in Keyston and Ingleton before his parents moved to a rented farm in Rathmel. John wanted to be a coach driver, but his father wished him to be a farmer. Hence, he became a farmer in Rathmel until the age of 65. In 1947, he married schoolteacher and amateur poet Olive Summers, and they had 5 children. He gives a lovely eulogy, well, not a eulogy, he's alive. He gives a wonderful life story here of him. A kind farmer, he did not enjoy the negotiations at the auction mart, had names for all his cattle, and is still respected locally as a fair and generous person. Right, so he was an air raid precaution warden during the Second World War. His total war experience was one lone plane flying low along the Ribble Valley. He was also a fine tenor. He was in the choral societies, and into his 90s sang with a weekly group. Oh, lovely. He's been writing a diary since the 1930s, a fascinating history of farming, family and community through the years, the happy and sad times. Failing eyesight is now making this a challenge, but he still jots down his thoughts most days. A birthday party was celebrated in Rathmel to celebrate his milestone, along with a card from the King. That's a thing in the UK. If you get to 100 years old, you get a card from the King. Well worth it. Well, I hope you enjoyed the 3 local newspapers, one from Gibraltar, one from the coast here in Yorkshire, and one from up in the Dales. And my own personal news, as I say, I'm being evicted, but don't panic. It looks like it might be okay. Touch wood. I hope so. See you next week. Thank you very much for listening.